Well, I lied. At the end of my last video, I said I was going to try a little something different for this one. I planned to talk about a TV show since I've only talked about movies so far, but I didn't feel 100% confident when I was making, so I think I'll save that for later. Since I'm not doing that anymore, I decided to move on to my next video idea, which is about the original TMNT movies from the 90s. My last video was about the Michael Bay produced films, which you should go check out if you haven't already. And at the end of that, I mentioned the 90s movies. Some folks in the comments also kept bringing them up as well. I think I saw the first two movies when I was younger, but I don't remember them much. However, I've always heard that they're classic fun movies. So, in order to see for myself, and also to contrast my last video, I'm gonna find out today, are the 90s TMNT movies really that good? Now, before we get started on the first movie, I just want to say that since I recently watched those Michael Bay films, I obviously have a lot of things from that movie still in my head, and I'm probably going to be comparing those newer ones with these older ones. It's a little hard to not compare the iterations at all, but I'll try to limit that. So, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was released in 1990, and I could not see it in theaters because I was -7 years old at the time. But I know that this is obviously a product of the 90s from the music and the dialogue.
Come on, let's move it. I'm starving. Ooh, we're major pizza attack here, dudes.
It begins in a similar way to the 2014 TMNT because the first character we see is April O'Neil, and she's already searching for her story. There's a wave of crime throughout New York, and everyone is trying to understand what's going on. As April leaves work, she runs into some of the culprits, and they try to keep her quiet. But again, similarly to the 2014 film, April gets saved by some mysterious vigilantes. Now in this movie, they knock out the lights and beat up all the criminals, again, very similar to the 2014 movie. I'm sure they probably took a little inspiration from this scene, but I actually like how it's done here more. It's a completely black screen and you can only hear what's happening. And I'm sure you're thinking, how is a black screen more interesting? Well, I personally really enjoy imagining what's going on instead of seeing sudden flashes of action like in the 2014 film. After that, we see the boys down in the sewer and all their glory.
Hi.
So the turtles look weird, of course, but as a few people mentioned about their looks in the last video, they're mutant turtles, so of course they're going to be a little strange looking. I think these work much better though, because of the obvious fact that they are, real characters. Sure, the Bay movies had people in mocap suits, so they're technically not completely CGI, but these turtles are practical. The suits are really there, and the human actors are actually interacting with the turtles instead of guys in suits with balls all over them. Practical costumes and animatronic characters, or puppets, will pretty much always stand the test of time. Look at the obvious example of Star Wars with Yoda. Yoda, back in 1980, was a Muppet, and he looks like a real living being. Compare that to the CGI from the prequels, and sure, he looks fine, but he feels a little more, well, alien. And not in a good way. And if you think that wouldn't work today, just look at his little nephew over in The Mandalorian. Grogu's a puppet, and that's gotta be one of the major reasons why he's so beloved. Because he's tangible. So that's why I think these suits, while a little weird, feel more real than any CG characters. While I'm on the topic of their looks, I'll also bring up their designs, which are simple and classic. While these designs of course look great, I will admit that not having the more modern updates to the characters feels a little weird now. Donnie not having glasses almost feels wrong, and Raph not having his full head bandana also makes him stand out a lot less. Despite those minor nitpicks though, I really love how they look in this movie. They also act pretty in character, which is like the one thing you can't really mess up with the turtles unless you really just don't give a shit. So Raph goes out looking for his Sai because he left it behind when they initially saved April, and he runs into Casey Jones, who I forgot was in this first movie, but I'm glad he's here. Having him from the beginning feels like a nice change compared to the 2016 movie. And speaking of that movie, this guy feels a lot more like the Casey Jones that I always knew. He's got the long hair, the cocky yet confident attitude, and he's kind of a vigilante already, just looking for bad guys to beat on. 2016 Casey was just Stephen Amell. He didn't really feel like Casey Jones to me. After Casey leaves, Raph runs into April again in his insane drip, and he saves her from the Foot Clan, which we finally see. Once Raph gets back to the sewer with the unconscious April, he was unfortunately tailed by a foot ninja, and when they leave to go chill with April, they return to find their home destroyed and Splinter gone. And while Splinter was doing the typical mentor thing at the beginning of this movie, I actually like that he's away from the turtles for a lot in this one. In most turtle stories I remember, Splinter's just sitting in the sewers waiting for the boys to mess something up so he can give them some wisdom. But for a good bit of this movie, they're all on their own, and they have to essentially fend for themselves. Luckily, they've got April, who's a big part of the team when she isn't dealing with her boss and his son. Speaking of that kid, we have a character here who seems inconsequential at first, but we learn that Danny is actually a pretty important part of the story. At the beginning of the movie, he was one of the various kids stealing stuff for the Foot, and when we meet Shredder for the first time, we realize this is his plan. Instead of trying to take over the city with some crazy machine or something, he's actually doing something a little more unique and almost more dangerous. He's grooming the young people of New York City because they're naive and more susceptible to his messages. Having these kids be the foot ninjas is way more interesting than them just being faceless goons. Seeing Shredder have a plan that's a little more, sneaky and cunning works a lot better than big funny evil machine. After Shredder gives his big speech about killing the monsters, the Foot find the turtles and start fighting them?
Oh, a fellow chucker, eh?
Chucker. I love how everyone just stops and respectfully watches this. They have a big fight, of course, and the turtles have some really fun moves in this sequence. I love this shell sandwich move, and the spin on the ground is so dumb, but so funny. I love that these turtles are constantly doing silly stuff in the middle of combat, but they're still just as effective. They don't need to be super serious when they're fighting. They can be skilled and still have a good time. Unfortunately for April, things go bad and her whole building catches on fire, forcing the turtles and friends to flee the city. They head to April's old family farm so they can regroup before they need to fight the final boss. I actually like these scenes because it's nice to see that, like I said, the turtles are effective and can have fun, but they can't fight forever. Even these mutants need some rest. They also go for a little meditation session one night and start using the Force, and Splinter appears as a Force ghost. This part is a little weird, honestly, but I'll just assume they're using their chi or something like that. I don't know. Also, this scene shows that while I really enjoy the practical suits, they aren't the best at conveying emotion. The boys are clearly meant to be sad in the scene, but the faces don't help show that. It just looks like they're really shocked or something, and these tears aren't making this any less funny looking. Also, earlier in the movie and at this point, they do some overly dramatic screams that maybe weren't necessary. Jesus. And the Oscar goes to... I still really enjoy the suits as opposed to CGI, but clearly they still have their issues. So when Splinter becomes one with the Force, the boys return to the city to fight Shredder, and at the same time, the kids are all realizing that Shredder isn't the nice guy they thought he was. With Casey and Danny's help, they understand that blindly following this guy who does nice things for them sometimes isn't the best idea. I gotta say, I actually really enjoyed the human plots in this movie. I didn't like those parts at all in the Bay movies. I only enjoyed the turtle story. But in this movie, I think the way Shredder uses these kids to further his agenda really adds a nice element to the film overall. These kids are all just trying to live their lives as kids do, but they realize they shouldn't do that if it comes at the cost of stealing from people or hurting your loved ones like Danny with his dad. This is so much more engaging than Vern wanting to get into April's pants. So yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about this movie. The ending is pretty simple. The turtles get beat up by Shredder because they're fighting him one by one for some reason. Splinter shows up to prove he's a master and flips Shredder off the roof. And then Casey fucking kills him with a garbage truck. Then they all live happily ever after and say some funny 90's words.
Huh? Cowabunga! I made a funny.
And the movie ends with this turtle power song that goes so hard. Speaking of, let me briefly talk about the music. I think the music in this movie works well. The Turtles theme in this feels fitting for the characters in this time period, much better than the action movie superhero music from the Bay films. And they play some fun music like Turtle Power and Tequila for whatever reason. These songs really fit my view of the Turtles, so I really like having these sprinkled throughout the movie. This movie's not necessarily some groundbreaking piece of filmmaking, but it's a hell of a fun movie to watch, and I'm sure that will still be the case in another 30 years. I'm going to give this movie an 8 out of 10. I had a lot of fun watching it, and I feel like I could easily put it on randomly and still have a great time. Moving on to TMNT 2, The Secret of the Ooze, which honestly is a little misleading because the movie doesn't focus that much on the ooze, but we'll get to that in a minute. First, let's talk about the beginning of the film. So at the start of the movie, everyone is eating pizza. Like, actually everyone. People on a date, cabbies, people on the street, cops who are clearly committing police brutality by not giving this guy pizza. The pizza place is filled wall to wall with people. This movie is pizza propaganda, which honestly is probably the best kind of propaganda. New York pizza is the best pizza in the whole world, so why shouldn't they show that off? But seriously, this is a little strange, and I'm sure there might be some actual reason why they put this in the movie, but honestly, it's way more fun not knowing if this is just a gag or not. I'm just gonna believe that this movie thinks all New Yorkers perpetually have a slice of pizza in their hands. Anyway, let's talk about the actual movie. The story begins when this new kid Kino goes to deliver a bunch of pizzas to April's house, which obviously aren't for her, and he runs into some robbers. He knows martial arts, because why not, but he can't take on all these crooks. Who can? The Turtles, of course. And they easily take down all these bad guys, but this whole sequence also shows that this movie's leaning a little heavier into the silliness this time around. Remember when I said in the first movie that there felt like a good balance of good fighting and fun fighting? Well, that balance has shifted heavily to the fun fighting side. I like most of the fights in this movie still, but they all feel a lot goofier. And it feels like everything is a lot less serious as a result. Now, I know of course the TMNT aren't meant to be taken too seriously, but I really like the balance of seriousness and levity from the other movie. It feels like there's not really any stakes in this movie, and I don't think the silliness stops in the fights. Like I said, it kind of makes everything feel goofier. Raph talks a lot more like a stereotypical New Yorker now for some reason.
Come on, Leo. What do you say? Let's do it, eh? Whoa! Would you get a load of this crazy joint?
It's probably because his actor changed. But other characters like Splinter speak weirdly too.
Where's Splinter?
He's been up on the roof ever since he saw your report.
Really? Doing what?
Coming. To a decision.
And of course, surprise surprise, Shredder isn't dead, but he almost feels like a completely different character this time. Again, different actor, but him and Tatsu barely have any personality in this movie. All they do is grunt and growl for most of their scenes.
Shredder!
I don't know why they chose to lean into the slapstick elements more for this movie, because the last one is obviously aimed at kids as well, but there's moments that everyone can appreciate, like the Danny stuff and the Shredder and Splinter backstory stuff, which is like the most intriguing stuff I've seen with those characters in the movies that I've reviewed. This added silliness doesn't ruin the movie entirely though. There's still some fun moments, of course. We still get the occasional fun fight scenes and actual funny lines here and there.
The perimeter's quiet.
Yeah, a little too quiet.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah, a little too easy. Yeah.
Look, it's Raph.
Yeah, a little too Raph. Yeah. You take the ugly one.
No, you take the ugly one.
I'll take the ugly one.
Which one's the ugly one?
Also, I should probably briefly mention Toka and Razor. They had a lot more comedic stuff in the movie, and as with everything else, some jokes are hits and others are misses. The characters themselves are kinda inconsequential. Shredder gets them to wreck the city to attract the turtles, but they only wreck like a couple of streets, and all they do is flip some cars and knock down light poles. Yeah, they're causing damage, but it's not anything that's gonna really hurt anyone. Just stuff that'll really inconvenience them. You would think Shredder would want to maybe kidnap people or destroy some buildings or something, but nope. Toka and Razor just run around like unattended kids in a grocery store. Around this part of the movie, the boys also save the doctor who was involved with the Ooze, and they find out their creation was a complete accident. This makes Donnie sad because apparently he thought they were more special, like they were destined to be created, and this is an interesting idea. However, it doesn't really come back up. He's sad when he finds out, but they don't really make it a point to show him understanding that despite being created accidentally, him and his brothers are still special. So yeah, this is what I meant by saying the title is a little misleading. We find out the Ooze was what created the turtles, which they actually already covered in the last movie, and it made Toka and Razor and made those dandelions grow at the beginning of the movie. So I don't know, I'm kind of confused about what the secret is. That it mutates things? I thought we already knew that. I'm not sure, but let's not focus on that too much. We gotta get to the obvious most fun moment in the movie at the nightclub with the classic ninja rap. Now this is the stuff that I think is silly, but it fits the setting. Of course the boys are gonna have some fun and goof around when they're surrounded by loud music and party people. This makes sense, while I feel like playing football in a laboratory with the dangerous Ooze is just a little much. The club also leads to one of the funniest scenes in the movie where they just blast Shredder through a window with a speaker. What the fuck? What? First he gets crushed in the back of a garbage truck, and then he gets flung out a window at 60 miles an hour. Shredder just cannot catch a break. Oh, and then he turns into Super Shredder, which is a cool concept, but the actual result is very anticlimactic. He turns into this giant monster, and you would think the boys are gonna have to fight him now, but nope, he just kills himself at the pier, and the boys escape with their super powerful ninja technique, jumping in the water. Because, you know, they just remembered their turtles. Very lame way for Shredder to go out. Overall, I don't think this movie is as good as the first one. It's not bad, but it feels a lot weaker compared to the last movie. The first film feels like a fun kids movie that can also be enjoyed by adults and can give some small lessons to everyone. Secret of the Ooze feels like it's aimed a lot more at kids, but it's still fun to watch at times. I think it's like a 6 out of 10. Now, with the first movie, I said it had a good balance of serious and fun stuff. Then the second movie tips the scales more to the side of fun stuff. In Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, they took that metaphorical scale and threw it out the fucking window like Shredder. This movie is completely baby stuff. Turtles 3 feels like an actual child wrote it, because there's little substance at all in this entire movie. Remember when you played with random toys as a kid and made up a story in your head, but you were essentially just making the toys slam into each other? That's how I see Turtles 3. The plot barely matters, the dialogue is mind-numbing, the action is incredibly weak, and one of the biggest unfortunate things is that the turtles look worse now. The credits don't mention the Jim Henson Company who made the Turtles and Splinter suits for the first two movies. And if you didn't know, Jim Henson and his company are the people who made the Muppets, so that's why the suits and animatronics felt more lifelike in the first two movies. The third movie used a different company, and now the Turtles look like nightmarish monsters that I've jokingly called the other iterations so far. It's funny to say the Bay Turtles and the ones from the first two 90s movies are ugly, but I'm mostly joking. This time, I'm not. These are hideous, and you cannot argue with me here. There is no life in these characters. Their souls were left behind in that club with Vanilla Ice. The dialogue has completely devolved into nonsense. This sounds like something that I would have written in my notebooks when I was 6 years old, not something that a Hollywood screenwriter would create. Just listen for yourself.
That switch will only work under one condition. You know what that is? Tuesdays?
What the fuck is
Groundhog's
this
Day?
writing?
Oh, great. Help, I'm a turtle and I can't get up. Absolutely. Shwing.
Dude.
Hey, you were expecting maybe the Addams Family? Good one.
And the action is a complete joke now. Everyone goes down in 1 or 2 hits. There's no fighting, it's just the good guys win and the bad guys lose. These trained samurai warriors who have nothing else to do except train, because it's the 1600s, lose to a single punch from a giant green frog. They try to put some minuscule amount of emotion into the story by having the turtles save this village and bond with this little kid named Yoshi. But I can't feel anything when this off-brand Muppet is giving this child CPR. This movie just feels like a fan film. I don't know how this is real. And when I'm not confused at what I'm watching, I'm just completely bored. Nothing interests me here and makes me want to see how the story ends. I don't care about the characters, their motivations, none of it. The only thing that I actually genuinely enjoyed was the samurai in present day. I never mentioned because who cares, but the plot of the movie is that the turtles rub a lantern that April bought at a pawn shop or some shit, by the way, and they go back in time to 1600s Japan and essentially trade places with whoever rubbed the lantern back then. So the turtles go back to the 1600s while the samurai come to the 1900s. And they discover things like TV and arcade games, Cheetos, and hockey. The way they start to love hockey, but only the fighting parts, is really fun to watch. This less than 5-minute scene is more endearing than the other hour and a half of this movie. And I guess there are some occasional good lines and fun moments like these.
I think I swallowed a frog. I hope it wasn't an ancestor.
Go ahead, finish me.
Okay. Short enough for you?
But besides that, there's nothing of value here. They try to shove in one last character moment with Mikey wanting to stay in the past, but like that was barely alluded to in the rest of the movie. If anyone was going to do that and seem believable, it should have been Raph, because he was the one who was actually trying to form a bond with Yoshi. But Raph's the one who sees Yoshi and is like, hey, nice getting to know you, kid. I gotta go now though. So I don't know why they felt the need to drag the ending out with Mikey's stuff. And I don't care. I don't want to talk about this movie anymore. I already forgot 90% of what happened. The first two Turtles movies are fun to watch and hold up well enough. This third movie is a waste of time now, and I'm sure it was a waste back in '93 as well. This is a 2 out of 10. This movie is boring, it has barely any substance or anything else of value. Make a movie about those samurai guys doing stuff in New York for an hour and a half, and you got an infinitely better movie. 10 out of 10, $5 trillion at the box office, every single Oscar, all for the real heroes of this film. Alright, well, that'll do it for the 90s TMNT trilogy. I realized after my last video that I didn't really give a definitive answer to the question I asked in the title. The answer to that question was no, the Bay movies aren't that bad. They're not the best, but they're not too bad. The answer to this question though are the 90s TMNT movies really that good is more of a mixed answer. The first one is very good in my opinion. I think it blends the best part of the Turtles and their supporting characters together pretty well. Each of them maybe could have gotten a little bit more personal development, but I still think it's pretty solid overall. The second movie is alright, but it leans a little too hard into the goofiness and the 90s stuff, but just a little. And the third movie is not good. It is quite bad actually. When I think about it, every time I heard the 90s movies were good, I never heard anyone mention the third movie. And clearly there was a reason for that. So yeah, this trilogy's alright. It's a good enough addition to the TMNT world. The thing that's really good though is that these movies helped introduce a bunch of kids in the 90s to the Turtles, and that helped them stick around to this day. Watching these 5 movies and making these last 2 videos really rekindled my love for the Turtles, and I think this is a pretty special franchise. Now, I'm going to take a break from talking about them after this so I don't turn into a turtle channel. But I would like to share my thoughts on more stuff in the future. I like to watch the TMNT movie, which I think is sort of a sequel to this trilogy, and I'd love to talk about some of the shows at some point. I actually kind of want to watch the 87 cartoon and see how well that holds up. So while I don't plan on making more TMNT videos anytime soon, I will absolutely be revisiting my favorite Italian reptiles at some point. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you around. Hi again. I wanted to mention my next video idea here, but I did that in the last video and my plans changed, so I think I'm going to stop doing that unless I'm really sure of what I'm making next. I don't want to mention too many of my ideas on this channel so I can kind of keep things more of a surprise, but I may mention some ideas I have in my podcast, Ocean View. That's up over on my second channel, and if you want some more info about that channel or this channel, please go check out my recent lore video that I made. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you for the next video.